This is my interview with Slikey, the technical director at Hytale, and I gathered questions about the newly announced infinite world height from Hytale players, and I picked the 23 best questions to ask the Slikey. The answers that came out of the interview genuinely left me more excited than when I went in, and I think it's going to do the same for you. If you'd like to see more developer interviews and keep up with everything Hytale, you can support this content by subscribing to the channel and liking this video. Let's jump into the interview with Slikey. Let's get started. So first thing is, how about you introduce yourself to everybody?
Hey, I'm Slikey. I'm the technical director of Hytale and was one of the few people that worked on Hytale for over 10 years at this point. I don't even actually know how long I worked on this project. I worked on the Hypixel Minecraft server before, and before that, I basically still went to school. So this is, I do block games, and I do it for a long time.
Yeah, it's almost been your life at this point, right? Feels like it anyway.
Pretty much, yeah. My entire 20s.
Wow. Okay.
And
awesome.
I'm 32, so we'll see how long this still continues, but I hope for a long time.
I'm sure as long as you decide to take it that way, you guys are doing good. And you were pretty involved in the whole process of reacquiring too, right?
Yeah, and I think people remember sort of the first days of Twitter, and yeah, then Simon, me, and Patrick, Philippe, we all talked together and talked with former team members, and we assembled the crew together, and basically then, I mean, 54 days between acquisition and release, right? So we got it done. And now we're on the long haul. That was the sprint. Now the marathon really is going.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about the recent announcement that you guys made that Hytale is going to be capable of infinite world height, and the term cubic chunks has come up. So I just want to establish a baseline knowledge for everybody that's watching this is what is infinite world height and what is cubic chunks?
Cubic chunks is basically a way of describing to the player that we are moving away from columns that we currently have in the game. That is pretty much we stack all the vertical blocks that can be there in one area of the world all on top of each other. And it's the entirety of the height that you can see in a world, all the way from bedrock to the sky, is one big column. And that's something that works when you have a limited height, but that's really something we kind of want to move away from, because it's very limiting. We currently have a maximum of 320 blocks in a world, and the concept of cubic chunks really is just a reused term from another modding community that describes that we are getting rid of this concept of the column, and every single thing in the world is now a some 32 by 32 by 32 blocks chunk.
Yep.
And we stack them on top, left, right, in every direction basically, and it's sort of it's just this infinite jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, so basically now, instead of you have the game being forced to load the full 0 to 320 vertically like a lot of these block games do, now you can choose that height in which you load, which is important, like you're saying, when you can infinitely go up or infinitely go down. Obviously, loading up and down infinitely wouldn't work. The game would explode, more or less. So now you get the chance to choose how much height, just like we already choose how much width gets loaded.
Yeah, if you imagine the way that currently we basically load a circle around you. So every single, you're somewhere in the world, and in a circle around you, we are basically loading a big cylinder of all the blocks that are there. And we are moving this into a sphere.
Yes.
So it's no longer about how tall the world is. It is about what is in your vicinity. And that's that's really a new challenge in every single way.
Awesome. All right, so let's hop into the questions. And as you know, we pulled these questions in from a lot of people on Twitter, some in my Discord and YouTube comments, and these are some really good questions. For those watching, I took the questions almost verbatim, but I tweaked them a little bit. So if this is your question, you'll notice maybe some extra words and stuff in here, but it's getting across the same point. And let's start with the first one here, which is from Hotline, that said, what are the advantages and disadvantages of infinite world height?
Yeah. So like when we say infinite, first of all, we mean practically infinite. The same way that Hytale's horizontal world is infinite today, like you can travel out like hundreds of thousands of blocks before we kind of run into this current issue of floating point precision that I will go in like one day. But eventually we kind of run into like, you can go even further, you can go out millions, but then like kind of, let's assume the floating point precision issue doesn't exist. Eventually you run into the limitations of a computer. So when we say infinite, we mean under the sort of limitations of a computer that has a finite number space. So it's still a lot, and for every single, like in every single sense of like practicality, you are never going to explore the entire world before your hard disk completely fills up. But it's the same as, you know, when you play any sandbox game that has procedural generation, you kind of eventually fill up your hard drive before you run out. Like you basically have discovered everything. And so I just want to make sure that like when we say infinite, it's not
literal.
Infinite.
Yeah, which again, like Slikey said, this is true of pretty much any voxel game. It's not like a true infinite, but it kind of like it might as well be infinite to the player. There's a mathematical limit that we do end up hitting. So what would you say are let's start with like the disadvantages. So what are the what kind of disadvantages, if any, that you can see are there of having this, and we'll keep using the term infinite world height just for ease. So what are the disadvantages of that, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, like when it comes to the disadvantages, it's really, the problem is that we didn't start with it.
Yeah.
So the design challenge is pretty real here, and it's like we have built a ton of systems with the assumption around this 320 block height, world height, and that includes like our NPC spawning. It includes like our V1 Worldgen minimap, or like the not minimap, but like the map itself. And like, you know, if we were to include a minimap in the future, then like now we can't. Like we have to figure out how we do that, because usually maps are generated sort of from this bird's eye view. But there's like also, for example, the sunlight system. So like at the moment when you have a top block, like that is exposed to the sun, and it's like, what is now your top block if you don't know? Like maybe there are, you know, 4,000 blocks further up, there's suddenly a new, like another island. Does that count as like that it blocks sunlight?
Yeah.
Probably not. Like, you don't want that. So there's like no clear-cut answers here to these things, and it's kind of all trade-offs, and we have to figure out solutions to this. There is luckily a lot of good ideas that are like being sent towards us, and like I read them all and I try to include like all the options, but in the end, stuff like the sunlight stuff is a thing where you just don't have a good solution. You pick your poison.
Yeah.
And so that's something we'll have to do. Like we've run some internal tests with 512 and 768.
Yeah.
View distance, or like world heights under the current system, where we just simply stacked more like chunks on top of each other. And just, the benefit is real. Like it is actually amazing to have such a massive underground, but at the same, and like such tall mountains, because if you look at the world currently, you're like kind of, you're on like 120 blocks base level. Now you have 200 more blocks to the sky, and we can use maybe 150 of those, like before you kind of run into other limitations where the player can no longer build on the top of a mountain. So you have like 150 blocks of mountain.
It's restrictive.
Like, yeah, it's restrictive, and it's like, so when you add, you know, hundreds more in options, you're like, oh wow, this mountain now actually looks really, really good. So, yeah,
I'm sure it creates a problem with Sure, it creates a problem with scale too, because like I don't know, what if you guys wanted to have a prefab that's like 100 something blocks tall, and then you compare that to a mountain that is also 100 something, like the scale doesn't really look right, and but that's what you have to work with without the infinite world height.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's like it's basically in every way like the other challenge is that if you're also now on a very tall mountain, like you're, as I said, like you're loading a sphere around you, then what if you can no longer see like the down like down on like into the valleys because you're just too high up. So we're talking about, you know, ways to view more terrain. I'm not gonna say the words here, but
Yeah.
you know, like that stuff that then comes after of the challenge of like, how do we now like really boost the view distance to make sure that those get a proper benefit? Like when you're on the Himalaya in the world, like in the real world, you can see far until kind of the fog sets in.
Okay. All right, let's move on to this question from Voltorn. How will infinite world height affect file sizes of players' worlds? And then do you plan any tools to allow players to prune chunks in order to keep file sizes down or generate new terrain through the updates?
Yeah. So first, we start with the good news, and that is that the system is actually more efficient than what we have today. Right now, we kind of generate every single column to its fullest extent, whether you need it or not. And with the cubic chunks, we only generate what's actually within your view distance. So if you're on a lower-end machine with shorter render distance, you're generating less world, not more. And that is something that is generally beneficial. So like we currently see that there are some players who are playing under the minimum spec requirements that we put out, and they are just choosing to put the view distance like even lower than we expected. It's just like they are still generating a lot of stuff, and so yeah, that's one thing. As for pruning tools, that's like that's a need that already exists really in the game, and even regardless of cubic chunks. And as such, it's kind of a personalized problem because the specifics of what is worth pruning and what is not is kind of challenging. And I would rather have the modding community like do this than us sort of trying to just solve this and not really end up solving it. Like it's a thing that usually external tooling or modding or like mods are just way better at solving.
Okay. Is that something you think will be possible for modders to do, like to have like not something that requires an external tool, but like something that exists inside of Hytale that a modder can create to allow like world pruning, deleting chunks, that sort of thing?
Oh, absolutely. They can already do that.
Awesome. All right. That sounds good. Okay, let's move on to a question from Shane B. Currently, the world struggles to generate beyond 100,000 blocks out. Will this be quote unquote fixed? And will vertical height have the same issues as horizontal does? Now, we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier. So to answer that more specifically.
So this is a completely separate problem to cubic chunks, and it's actually a floating point precision issue. And at extreme distances, like far out from the world, we are currently using something called a 32-bit floating point number, and that basically leads to visual glitches further out in the world. Like the higher that your coordinate gets, the worse the problem gets, because you're kind of losing that precision at the end of the number in order for the number itself to be bigger. Other games kind of solve this by using a 64-bit float, but that really doesn't quite solve it. It just pushes the problem further out. So, exactly. So like we're looking at actually fixing it, and there are like, if you actually go there, you will see that different systems are breaking down at different times, and that's because some systems are already resilient against this problem and others are not. So like it's on our list, but right now, even if we have like 100,000 in every single direction, that's already quite a lot. in terms of like what the game actually has to offer.
Yeah.
Like we don't have enough content for you to actually like run out of content in this 100K area, and so it's not really that like urgent of a fix, but is definitely something that we want to visit once the cubic chunks like base is in there.
Yeah, you know, obviously it's a problem that a very, very small fraction of a percentage of players will ever come across. And almost all of them that do come across it will only come across it because they're trying to get to the point where it breaks, because that's like a challenge and a fun thing to do, you know, the walk to the far lands or whatever, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
But it is something that you guys kind of like have that you're thinking about, that maybe later on you may see if you can quote unquote fix that, or give players a much further distance they could go were they to choose to do so. I could see it like I guess being, I don't want to call it an issue, but it could come up like I have a server that I run in Minecraft, and in that server we have like these themed areas, right? They're like a district, just like a themed area. And we always would look around the map to find like that perfect spot for that area. And we have stuff that's 40,000 blocks out here, 60,000 blocks out there, just to find that like one really cool spot. So I could see it coming up, but I wonder, could you always
definitely an issue. It's definitely an issue, and that we are aware of. We will eventually get to fixing it, but the cubic chunks itself is first. Then we look at the floating point precision, and then like far distance rendering, or what people call LODs.
Yeah. And I guess just to tie it in infinite world height, I see it being a lot harder for somebody to run across that issue vertically, because it's so much just harder natively to travel vertically anyways. Traveling up 100,000 blocks is going to be a lot more difficult and take a lot more time than horizontally.
That's basically also a design question of like, is there actually going to be 100,000 blocks of content, right?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny to think about. A question from Hawk-On: how will chunks load around the player? Is it a sphere, a cube? Is it a sphere or a cube? And how far out do you think that distance will be in chunks? How will this handle players falling, for example, in drop-based mini map games? So basically, like, we're not talking about how far out can you run to load, but like when you the player are standing there, how far out from you is loaded? What is it now? Is that going to expand in the future? What are your thoughts there?
So when it comes to the loading pattern generally, as I said, we are probably going to first go with that spherical around you, and not the cylindrical. And that's like really an option that we can always dial in. Like, it's kind of too close to the implementation details that I won't make a final call. That's for the engineers to actually work on. But when it comes to the second part of the question, which is probably the more interesting, is for falling. And like, let's say the problem here is you have a drop tower, and that drop tower is like really, really tall, and it's like hundreds of thousands of blocks. So now you're like falling at ridiculous speeds, and like, is the engine going to be able to keep up with that loading off it? Mm-hmm. And so for us right now, we kind of have the terminal velocity, and in this scenario where you're like falling faster than chunks can load, it's like, today it's like a theoretical problem, and in the future we really need to look at it, because in most cases, if you're falling and you're falling through air, then it's really fast to load.
Yeah.
If you're falling through something solid, well, you're kind of colliding anyway. So the two extreme cases here are trivial. It's everything in between.
Okay.
And so I want to see this problem actually arise, and like, I want to experience it, and then we look at how do we solve it. Like, are we going to use predictive chunk loading or something like that? I don't know yet. That's usually like stuff we solve once we have the implementation.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, the only time I really run across it is if like I'm in creative mode and I like crank the camera distance up really high to like travel across the map. Obviously, there's no way for it to really show up in like actual, normal gameplay at the moment. But I guess maybe it could if you guys have like, I don't know, some sort of like fast travel implemented at some point to where it could happen. But
it is definitely possible.
Yeah.
But like so far, I mean, those are like kind of things that usually take quite some time to actually like come up with a concept, then actually implement it, test it, validate it. It's just like Hytale has bigger problems right now.
Yeah, of course. Okay. All right. We got a question here from NP Beans. Do you plan on infinite world height to exist in the vanilla game anywhere, or is it more of a thing for modders?
Yeah. So this is where I am as the technical person. I run into limitations. I ask our design team, but for me, it is the technical capability being built into the engine. That's it. What our adventure game designers do with that is their call, and what our mini game designers do with that part is their call. So whoever is going to, like, whatever experience we're working on in a certain area can use this capability in whatever way they feel fit for the game. And what our design team basically told me was that for the default adventure experience in Orbis, they will very likely use a floor and a ceiling, and not like because they want to feel it or want it to feel small, but because it gives them a better way to shape the experience and leave room to grow over time. So those limits can then like be in different sizes. Like the underground currently is like 100 blocks. Maybe that's going to be 1,000 blocks in the future.
Yeah.
And then at the end, there is still bedrock under it. But now with like 10 times more underground content, that is unparalleled. Like you can do a lot of stuff with that. You can basically spend your entire like game in the underground. But that's something that they will then have to figure out once that capability actually exists. For modders specifically, I kind of imagine the inverse of Skyblock. So like imagine that there is sort of everything is solid stone when you start out, and it generates solid stone in every single direction, and now you're kind of like an ant colony, and you're building it like sort of in every way, and you're building your tunnels, and it's just I don't know, or for modders, being in like a zero gravity space environment where you delete all the blocks, you put like a bunch of asteroids on the world, you delete the gravity, and now you change the skybox around you as well, and suddenly you're in space. Like completely different playstyle, or a world with like 8,000 block tall mountains. Like you take the height maps that actually exist for the world, for like our Earth, and you just generate it like 1-to-1 size. That's what will be possible, but what we actually use with it and what modders use, what our designers use, that's kind of like secondary thought later.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense because, I think a lot of people may like instinctively like the idea of like, oh, I want my vanilla Hytale world to be infinite up and infinite down. But like from a gameplay design perspective, it's kind of hard because then you have to like, I guess like the world creators, the people designing the biomes, like, and you guys designing the game systems, then you have to design around all of that. And then it creates a lot more problems that you have to solve for only for the purpose of solving for it versus like just designing a good game. And maybe in the way that you guys design things, maybe you only have to go up like, I don't know, 500 or 1,000 blocks or something. And maybe you only have to go down 400 or 500 blocks. So I guess that's why mods exist, right? Because, somebody can, if somebody can make a mod that can go down thousands and thousands of blocks, and then, I mean, that's fine. That's the experience people are looking for.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on to, I'm going to see if I pronounce this right. It looks like it's like Sir Malohis asked, how do you see this affecting mining, such as exploring caves for resources, finding ores, and generating new and different cave types?
Yeah, so again, like this is a question towards design, and I brought an answer from our design team. Direction-wise, the underground should not just be deeper, it should feel meaningfully different as players descend. The current tentative direction is to split it into layers, with each one acting like a real threshold or milestone rather than just more caves. That does not mean that every layer must be dramatically distinct, but each one should add new pressure, enemy types, resources, or other reasons to prepare differently. For ore specifically, some resources should become more common or more prominent in certain underground environments, while others should stay rare and exciting to find. Some should be unique to specific environments or depths so that deeper layers can introduce entirely new materials. The challenge should often come not just from finding the resource, but from dealing with the environment, enemies, and hazards tied to it. Stay tuned for what the design team does with it. So that's the answer I got from the design team.
Awesome. I mean, it sounds like a cool way to experience the game, because currently I guess you think like you experience like different zones or biomes, right? And you go out to zone 4 and it has like its own like little sub biomes inside of it that you experience, and they have different ores and different difficulties. So really this is allowing them, in whatever way they decide they want to do the same thing going downward, where maybe between negative, like I don't know how you guys are going to do the coordinates. We'll figure that out, I guess. But let's just say, call it like -100 and -200 down, could have like a certain experience and certain enemies and certain ores. And then maybe if you go down another 100 blocks or 200 blocks, it gets even more difficult. And maybe the generation looks different, completely different down there too. You have like, you know, thin caves versus big cavernous caves and whatever other kind of like crazy stuff I guess they can figure out.
Yeah, and I mean, like, design sounds like they want to also make this, like, add these barriers in between so that it doesn't just flow into each other. And so, like, this is something where you basically have completely different progression vectors here that you're able to follow. And it's a kind of wherever you go in the world, no matter if you go up or down or left or right, like, you know, horizontally, you explore, either way, you're going to have progression, which sounds like something that would definitely bind my interest in the game.
Yeah, it seems like you could choose different ways of progressing. Like, okay, well, progressing horizontally means going to a different zone that has its own challenges, but then vertical progression down, or maybe even upwards in the future, could have its own like different progression. You could choose, am I going to work on progressing down into the world and getting the cool stuff there, or am I going to work on progressing horizontally and like whatever is involved with that? Like those things could look totally different, I guess, right?
Yeah. I don't know what they are thinking, but it's most likely going to be a lot of content that then awaits us like further down in the world.
Interesting. All right, let's pull in a question from Lucent here. Will Orbis or other worlds have infinite depth or an eventual bedrock layer? If infinite, how will this affect underground biomes? What might those look like?
Yeah, so this is another one where I brought the answer from our design team, and I'm just going to read it out.
Sure.
What we want is for the underground to extend pretty deep. The technology may allow near infinite depth, but for adventure mode, what matters is whether going deep stays meaningful. If depth comes with new hazards, rewards, and unique environments, it can still feel exciting. If it is just more stone, it quickly loses its value. So the goal for us is to use that vertical freedom to create a world that feels vast, but still purposeful and worth exploring. Underground biomes at different heights are already supported in our like Worldgen V2 system, and cubic chunks just remove the ceiling on how deep the world and like variety can get.
Awesome. And I'm assuming those guys are kind of working under that premise, right? Where, hey, if you want to go down further or up further, like that's fine. Like design it in the way that you think you want to design it. It's kind of like the handcuffs are off now, whereas right now the handcuffs are on. You can't go below 0 and you can't go above 320. So they're designing with that in mind.
Yeah, I mean, if you go into the underground of the world, like if you hit the no clip and you fly like in creative mode, and you see sort of how dense already the underground is, it's basically all caves. Like it's so densely packed with caves that there is basically no room for anything else anymore. And like having that all be a bit more relaxed is definitely going to allow them a lot more content down there that also feels more distinct.
That's interesting. I never thought about that. So because of the limitation and space that you have underground, you kind of almost feel like you have to fill it with a lot of caves, because obviously that's where people get a lot of important things, and it takes away from being able to put maybe larger, more massive things down there, or doing something totally different, because you don't have the space to do that now. So just something as simple as expanding the world down, even if it's a couple hundred blocks or something, or a few hundred blocks, it gives you guys the freedom to like put whatever you want down there. If you want to have a huge underground fortress, you can do that. You don't feel like you're taken away from like the rest of the world in that area.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's basically why we even experimented with those other world heights, to see how it feels.
Interesting. This is like a side question, maybe more of a me question. I'm going to insert one in here for you, or maybe even more of like a suggestion / idea that I've always had, which is, especially if we're moving to this idea of infinite world height up and down, or a much like larger expanded world height up and down. How do you have any thoughts on how that could change the Y coordinate system, the Y level? Like, because right now it's kind of simple. Y is bottom of the world and 320 is the top of the world. But if that's a lot larger, do you still keep that, or is it hard to keep that because you may always decide in the future to expand down further? Have you ever thought of like setting Y0 at sea level, and then anything that goes below sea level is a negative coordinate, and anything that's above sea level obviously is a positive coordinate?
Yeah, I mean, I like that idea. And the Worldgen V2 already has the base world height as a variable, and so that is something we can easily change. It's just currently the concept of negative Y coordinates doesn't exist in the engine, and that's basically where we then go. And I think it just makes sense to have sea level be the 0 value, basically.
Awesome. I hope to see that. I don't know why. It's always been something that's been like in my head important, or like an obvious thing to do from a lot of games, not just Hytale, but like any of these like blocky games that have that Y coordinate, and thought I'd run that by you. All right, we got a question from Goblin here. Do you think this will lead to the world designers adding more prefabs below ground and in the sky? I know we kind of touched on this a little bit, but I'll let you expand on that a little bit further, because he also added in up like in the sky as well.
Yeah. So it certainly opens the door, and we kind of have now like this liberty to add like really deep dungeons or sky temples, floating ruins, or whatever our designers want to add. Like our level designers basically get unbounded, and the handcuffs are kind of, or like the shackles are off. And that said, like within the content of adventure, increased height doesn't require entirely new categories of content. A lot of content concepts we already care about can exist without extreme height or depth. When we increase the world height, it's making some of those ideas feel more natural and believable, giving them a stronger and more coherent place in the world without needing to fake that sense of scale through workarounds. So you're like, you can actually put this massive temple somewhere. I mean, one of the things we have in the world right now is the Temple of Gaia, right? Like that's a, you basically, you walk into the Forgotten Temple, and then it's like you spawn in this like instanced massive thing, and it's like, that is something we couldn't easily put into the world right now, because it just needs to be in its instance to be isolated. And those kind of things, like, who knows, maybe they are going to be directly in the world in the future, or not.
Yeah,
up to them.
Interesting. Yeah, because like even right now, like there's no like big structure, like huge structures that are above ground, really. You've got some below ground. I've explored some of them. They're really cool. They're usually more like rooms and long hallways and stuff that you explore, but nothing really above ground. So this will definitely enable that, to allow them to put it in a way that looks good and doesn't feel out of place, right?
I mean, we have the Mage Tower in Zone 1. That is probably the tallest structure that we have.
Okay.
But yeah, even that like basically comes with its problems because then like now we are very limited on where we can actually place it,
Yeah.
and it needs to be on plains land, and it's like it can't be on a mountain. Everything that
Ah,
is on a mountain like now needs to be carefully curated, and like imagine we
that's a cool
actually had
thought.
that ability to put something like this tower,
Yeah.
this the onto a mountain, like onto the peak of a mountain that it can spawn there. It's just like it basically at the moment there's limitations and those just get removed.
Interesting. Yeah. Suddenly, if your mountains are 500 blocks tall on their own, and you have as much space as you guys decide you want to use above that, you can do something like that. It's a possibility. Whereas right now it's not. And I'm just imagining what that would look like in the game. Like when you like walk in and this big mountain renders in, and you see this huge tower poking out of the side of it that maybe reaches up like several hundred blocks into the air. That's like a cool point as a player to see that and think, oh my God, okay, well, I have to go explore that now because that's really cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
Especially when you then have stuff like the, really far view distances and you can kind of see this already like thousands of blocks away. And
yeah.
it's like, oh, like that's going to be, then you set out on a journey and like adventuring through the stuff that is on your way there. And that's
Yeah.
what really entices me.
That's interesting because right now, like the way that we mostly play these games, and I can't think of a game, another voxel game that has like any kind of crazy view distance to it either. Usually you run around the world and you kind of just hope for something to generate that seems interesting, and by that time it's probably like a few hundred blocks away. Maybe some games, or if you have a good enough PC or system, maybe it's 1,000 blocks at the most, but like it doesn't take that long to get there. So the concept of what if you could see a lot further than that, and you have this much more expansive world up and down like vertically, where you can see something and just get excited for the fact that it might take me like 20 or 30 minutes to get there because it's so far away. But like that level of excitement that you might get as a player of like, okay, I'm getting closer, and like those things start to come, like more things start to come into view, and you get closer to that objective. That sounds really fun. Like you said, an adventure. I feel like a lot of games like this
Yes.
miss that because you don't have an adventure. It's just like all of a sudden that thing appears in front of you. You're like, oh, okay, I'm here. There's no journey.
I mean, some of like some games like this are also you spend most of your time just in the underground. Like you
Mm-hmm.
basically have like almost no reason to even be in the overground, and it's like that's something we definitely want to change because the overground in Hytale is extremely pretty. The underground is also, but like the more we can do to make it even prettier, the better.
Awesome. So this is one that I had a lot of interest in too. It was asked by RRR 589. Will this also mean that you're going to make oceans much deeper?
Yeah, that's that's something like given the state of the current oceans, this like made me a bit smile
Yeah.
because oceans are kind of really lackluster right now in Hytale, by design. Like we just didn't invest time in there, but yeah, they can be like everything, like deeper, taller, and like whatever we want to do there, like having shallow layers that are closer to land, being full of corals and everything there, like and even like all the way to like a true deep abyss, like something like the Marianas Trench
Yeah.
in real life, like where you kind of you're already in deep water, and now you kind of have this situation where, oh my god, this is like so deep, what do I do? But it's a it's like a design question that like I again brought an answer from design here,
Sure.
and I'm just going to read it out.
Okay.
So they said oceans don't need to go on forever to feel compelling, but they should feel mysterious, dangerous, and meaningfully different from on-ground gameplay. What matters most is that underwater gameplay comes with its own challenges and possibilities. Unique resources, specialized equipment, limited oxygen, low visibility, and movement in full 3D space, where both navigation and threat awareness become much less predictable. That alone creates a lot of interesting possibilities without needing extreme depth. Multiple vertical layers to an ocean is now perfectly achievable. How much of that makes it into the adventure game is up to level design and gameplay design, but the technology is there to support it.
Interesting. And that kind of made me thought as you were saying that. We talked about progression going downwards in like a cave, right? Different layers of cave having different things, and you kind of like need to equip yourself or progress a certain amount to get lower. Maybe the oceans could be that too. Like, what if? And you mentioned the Mariana Trench. Like, it's not, you can't just swim down there. Like, you have to have stuff to go down there. So Hytale could expand in that way too, right? Where maybe to go a certain depth, you have to have certain equipment as a player, and maybe to go even further down, you have to have something even crazy, maybe even a vehicle of some type, or some other progressive based method to get down there. That's something that's not possible.
Or at least like a mithril diving suit or something like that. That
Yeah.
is just like really expensive to achieve, or something like that. Or it's like, I mean, it should be there with a purpose, and that's like the generally the red line that or like the thread that our design team always follows, is like it needs to have a purpose. And if we add such oceans and such content, then I'm sure that the design team will figure out a purpose to like put it into the overall mesh of progression. Like that it makes sense to go there at a certain point after you have done a bunch of other progression. So it's like it's just a thing that complements the whole gameplay experience.
Yeah. I would say so far, just like us talking about this, it's really kind of opened my mind, and I was already excited about it, of course, but like opening up the vertical space actually changes the game quite a lot, right? Like we're talking about new forms of progression underground and underwater, and I'm sure that could easily exist if you guys choose to at some point up above ground in the sky too, right? Like there's all these new systems and progression methods, or new items or new enemies, and all these different things that can exist in all of these spaces. And all of a sudden we're taking a game that just kind of just existed on ground level, and now we're exponentially increasing the things that you can do just because of the simple idea of, hey, you can go up higher and you can go down lower now.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, we basically have to use stuff like the portal dungeons to offer like really difficult experiences, and we have to offer like we want to give you the stuff, but you're not supposed to accidentally run into it or like get blocked by it in the world. Like if we want to have something really difficult. And now we put it into this, like you imagine it on a map.
Yeah.
Talking about a map, like I mean, my mouse pad is a big map, but
Yeah.
like let's say you put some space on here that's just really difficult, and now like you want to get through it, like you have to go all the way around it, or you accidentally walk into it. Like that's kind of this situation where we can avoid this. Like we can make the like horizontal space, the horizontal plane, like mildly different in difficulty, and put the really good stuff like up, down, wherever.
Yeah, because usually, like when you talk about vertical up or down, you do those things very intentionally. Like you're very intentionally going up or down to get somewhere. So putting difficulty in those spaces, I feel like, at least to me, makes more sense. Whereas a lot of people travel horizontally just because they're just wandering around. They're looking for something cool. They're looking for a place to make a base or something like that. So it's kind of cool, like. And I almost feel like right now we're not even playing in a 3D world. It's like all this time we've been playing in a 2D world, and now all of a sudden we're finally getting into the 3D space.
Yeah, exactly. And like given the sandboxness and like the uniformity of the world, like blocks being stacked on top and like everywhere, like them fitting nicely next to each other, it's kind of absurd to limit yourself and like not use the vertical space.
I got a question here from Nathan Nightshade. If you kind of reiterate on this again, he asked, will this allow mountains in Worldgen V2 to be a lot larger to feel more mountainous? So do you think this is something that the design, because I know we talked about this can be done. Is this something that you think will likely be done?
Yeah, so that's like I had a little bit of difficulty interpreting the question, if it is like a question regarding the technical capabilities of Worldgen V2, or if it's something that what we are going to make with Worldgen V2.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to answer both.
Okay.
And the first one is like the biggest difference between V1 and V2 is that like V1 was optimized for this limited height range, and it's like built very, very deeply into this assumption that there is a limit. V2 was built without that in mind. So from the ground up, it doesn't have the assumption of a limited world height, and that's like, you know, when we talk about the whole concept of Hytale V1s, V2s, V3s, like of all the systems, you can see that Worldgen is kind of like far ahead here of all the other systems, where it's like it's operating in an engine that has this limitation, even though the system itself does not like believe in this limitation anymore. And so that's definitely something that is possible. And when it comes to modders, like you will definitely be able to like configure your world generator to like generate 8,000 block tall mountains, or, you know, the Mariana Trench at like 12,000 blocks deep, and you can import real height maps and like use all of that to really get like that sense of real world scale. That said, though, again, from design here, the input is that games are fun not because they are realistic, but because they are realistic when it matters and skip everything else. So our view on that, the tallest mountain should be as tall as they can be, or as long as climbing. Like it's kind of like, as long as climbing them feels compelling, like and worth it. Like it's exciting to climb up this height, but then like when you started and you're like 5 hours in, you're kind of like, why am I doing this? And so we want to make sure that you're that it stays exciting, and for that we want to, you know, give you stuff like the hazards and like traversal tools. Like maybe there is, you know, stuff like like, you know, like a jetpack or anything like that. Obviously, I'm not saying that there will be a jetpack, but we need to think about alternative modes of travel that actually make these kind of terrains actually like enjoyable from a player's perspective. And it's not simply about making those like being able to generate it and then we do it. It's about, does it fit into the entirety of the game?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if it making something tall just for the sake of making it tall, that may sound fun to, I guess, some people, but you know, like you said, if you climb something for hours and you get up there and there's nothing there, that could actually be a disappointing thing to the player. So it sounds like something the world designer should keep in mind.
Or you simply want to get from A to B, and there's this massive mountain ridge in the middle, and you're like, like, please.
Yeah, like how do I get around this thing?
You know, exactly. So it's definitely something we like. It's now part of the toolbox of our designers, and they will try it, and they will see what sticks, what doesn't stick, and they will evaluate it. We will play test it. But you know, modders are always welcome to use the same tools to show us like what you can do, and maybe show us if there is ways to make really realistic terrain really fun.
All right, and I guess this kind of like a few of these questions kind of go along the same path of like what could make its way into the game. So I got another one here from Caleb. Do you think Orbis could have sky islands, or if not Orbis, maybe another world in a post-release update?
Yeah, sky islands are absolutely something the technology supports then, but there's like a potential of a lot of cool things that we can do, and like it's all about the traversal distance and risks of like moving between spaces high above ground. Like the whole like if it's part of Orbis or not, that's actually a really interesting question. Like when it comes to like DLCs in the future, I like DLCs in the sense of like
larger update.
I'm using that word, and like, yeah, it's like downloadable content. Like it's larger updates. Like that's what I interpret as it.
Okay.
What the games industry has made out of that term is something else, but you know, we're kind of different. So whatever we use words that the games industry has already recoined. But that's something that we will explore in the future.
And here was an interesting question that came from Arcano 713. And I'm going to expand on it a little bit. So his question was simply floating islands collab with Terraria. And then my follow-up question with that, to maybe add a little bit of context to it, would be, have you guys thought about collab based content or updates with other games in the future? Or is that something that you would like rule out as not wanting to really do?
We wouldn't rule it out, because like it's definitely something that we could do, and generally there are a bunch of indie games out there that have made it big, that we kind of see ourselves in good company with them. Then like Hytale is also now pretty much like a really one of those indie games, and yeah, I mean, we are currently focusing on making Hytale the best it can be, but if the right collaboration opportunity arises, like we'll definitely consider it.
Awesome. I'm sure a lot of people will be happy to hear, at the very least, that it's a possibility, because there's a lot of games would maybe say no, like they're not doing that sort of thing. But it seems something that a lot of people in the space like when they do see it. So hopefully we'll see something like that happen in the future. All right, I got a question from Guru Plant here. How do you plan on handling, and you talked about this a little bit, or we kind of touched on a similar topic anyways. How do you plan on handling sunrise, sunset at great heights? When you don't have a visible horizon, this could look funny. So how do you think that looks?
I mean, generally, we're basically talking about a V2 of the skybox system here, because it's not just like it's not just about the great heights without a visible horizon. It's also stuff like, what if you're now in like space, right? Like I keep bringing up this example of like you're in space.
Yeah.
Like there's going to be no horizon whatsoever anymore. And so like we basically need a skybox system that's less static, has better horizon emulation, and supports like a wide range of like vertical positions players find themselves at. And like more broadly, the sky and like atmosphere are like a big part of what we use to sell an altitude. And if gameplay is meaningfully changing with altitude, then so should the visuals, and that's something that we really need to look at. Like currently the skybox system that we have, and everything like with it, is probably one of the oldest systems we have in the engine. Okay. So like I can't wait for us to actually have to revisit this.
Okay, and I think you kind of touched on earlier a little bit too, like it could like if you guys don't do it, somebody could, right? If you go high enough in the air, maybe you kind of leave that atmospheric look and the sky starts to turn more black and maybe feel more like you're in space than you're down on Earth.
Absolutely. And I mean, like even if we look at things like the moon and the sun, like at the moment they are kind of like these two billboards that just rotate.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, but like, what if we are in a mod that is like in the solar system, and now you kind of want to have all planets and the sun be billboards like until you reach a certain like distance to them. So we need some way of dynamically putting these billboards there to really sell that illusion of you being in space and like all the stars and everything. It's just so much that we need to look at. I'm looking forward to figuring out what the new requirements for that V2 system are going to be, but that's going to be something we touch then after the groundwork is done.
Awesome. And I'm assuming too, you guys would not only go as far as like what you need to for whatever you do in the vanilla game, because maybe you don't need to go as far with this in the vanilla game, but modders likely will go much further than that. So whatever you guys do, I'm sure you're considering what modders may do above and beyond what the vanilla game does too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. I mean, we have like a bunch of modders in the team, and we all have like our pet peeves. Like mine is this EVE Online space game that is like your style, like you're in an MMORPG in an infinite space. Like, you know, there are these asteroids, there are planets, there's like all this stuff, you know, spaceships. And this is like my ultimate. I was asked recently what my white whale is, and like that is it. That is the thing that I want a modder to be able to implement in Hytale. And for that, there's a ton of things that we need to implement, and like cubic chunks is one of them.
Yeah.
But obviously the skybox is also one of them.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know,
a lot to consider that you wouldn't have thought about until you got to this point, right?
Yeah.
All right. I got a question here from Edelin. Do you think with infinite world height, something like multiple planets or a solar system / galaxy could be possible?
Yeah, I mean, I basically talked about this a bit more, but the major challenge really is that if we consider a planet is a sphere. Now, if we put a sphere into this infinite size, like let's say planet Earth has like 16,000 kilometer diameter.
Yep.
I think, right? Yeah, diameter. So even if I put that into a voxel grid, now you start running like on the top and you make your way around. You're kind of now at a situation where the blocks are still like this way, right? So like here you're kind of standing on here, like even if we have the different gravity. So no and yes. So the multiple planets or solar system is possible in more like a No Man's Sky way that you see. Like you can
like load into
fly to these planets and then load into it, and you spawn into like a Worldgen that like it's a separate world, but it's kind of flat again. So you kind of have like this one main world that is the space and the solar system itself, and then you kind of get into like each of the planets individually. But for us to actually have like this
a truly spherical world,
perfect,
yeah,
there's more stuff to be done, and I think that is that's like there's a lot more technical challenges with it. Like if we actually consider sort of localized warp voxels, that those voxels are now getting like slightly deformed, like if you imagine like in order to actually build a sphere out of voxels, you kind of need to like shape them this way.
Yeah, on a very small degree, but yes.
Exactly. Like I don't want to put a timeline or if we even ever going to do this.
Yeah, sounds hard to do. What about okay, so let's say you mentioned like, okay, well, what if it's more of like how No Man's Sky does, where you go to a world and you kind of load into that world, almost like kind of you guys have instancing now, which is kind of cool. I don't even know if the game's capable of this now. Maybe it is, and you could tell me, or if it's not, is this something you guys would consider? But what about having a world that can loop? You know what I mean? So like, let's say you eventually get to coordinate number 5,000, and then when you cross that line, now you're into negative 5,000 or whatever. So technically the world does loop on itself, even though it's not actually a sphere. As far as how the player plays it, it plays like it's a planet because you don't have a hard border anywhere. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I saw that question somewhere around.
Maybe it was. I'm jumping ahead.
World wrapping. Yeah, let's we can cover that later again.
Okay. Here I am messing it up. Okay, so I got a question from Fritz here. Would there be, either in a vanilla game or available via modding, the idea of gravity changing based on Y level, such as going up high enough in space, reducing or eliminating gravity, or possibly having a flipped world where if you cross over a certain point, gravity reverses? You know, say you dig down to the Earth's core and now you're on the other side and now everything kind of flips.
Yeah, this is absolutely the direction we want to go. And right now our physics system is like very early. And I'd even call it like a V0.1.
Yeah.
The future vision includes like a proper gravity system, like with attractors, gravity sources, rule-based physics, and where different zones or heights can have different gravitational behavior.
Mm.
And imagine it like gravity weakening as you climb, like
Yeah.
you know, getting over it. I think is is this example of a game where, you know, the closer you got to the end, you're kind of like became more and more weightless, but or even being like, you know, being pulled towards a floating island. And the physics system here just needs a massive upgrade, and it's something we'll invest in.
Interesting. Let's see. I got another one here from Guru Plant. How will global illumination work with having large objects overhead, including when they are outside of simulation/render distance? Now, you talked about this a little bit earlier. If you had anything extra to add to that.
Yeah, I just want to like first of all clean up with the term global illumination, because that's also one of those technical terms.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about here is not global illumination, but sunlight casting.
Okay.
So that is like but that's an important problem. Like we have, as I said, like if we have something that's, you know, 500 blocks above ground, then like does that block the sunlight or does it not? Like does it still allow casting or does it not? And like I talked about it earlier, but it's definitely a really challenging problem that we need to dive into.
Would that be something where, as you guys kind of solve this problem, that like maybe the game, your world, it could know something's out up there without necessarily having rendered it yet, like using like a seed map type thing to just know like, hey, there's something about this size above, and then that help you guys figure out what you're going to do with it?
Not really, because the world generation is really hard to approximate. And so it's something that we are like, it's not about like once it has been generated once, we can put it into, you know, a data cache.
Yeah.
But it's the stuff that hasn't been generated that is worrying us.
Okay. And I guess another thing you guys could always do too is like the further distance below an object you go, the less like shadow it would cast too. So technically, if something's high enough up in the air, unless it was massive, I guess, that maybe it wouldn't be a shadow cast because of how far away up there it is.
Yeah, the question is like, where is the line?
Where,
Like,
yeah.
do you draw that line at 200 blocks, at 250, 300? Like now you're kind of you put a new limitation in, because if you say, oh, it's going to be like 150 blocks, now your caves underground can no longer be taller than 150 blocks, because suddenly they would appear like you would have sunlight casting down there.
Interesting.
So it's like, maybe we disable this entirely under, you know,
Certain Y level. Yeah.
in negative Y. Yeah, but then, you know, you run into the next problem of what if you really want to use those? Like it's kind of there's no silver bullet.
A lot of problems, and a lot of people they'll dig, or maybe with some type of machinery we have in Hytale in the future, use that to dig a big hole that goes 1,000 blocks down in the ground. Now all of a sudden, if you made that rule universal to negative coordinates, well, what about that person that dug a hole 500 blocks down in the ground, and now their big open hole acts like in a way that you feel like it shouldn't?
Yep.
All right. I got one from OG Lemon here. Will there be an LOD system similar to the Minecraft Distant Horizons mod that lets you see at extreme distances?
Yeah, so this is different than cubic chunks, but it's like related in spirit. We covered this a little bit earlier, but our priority is right now is that we finish the cubic chunks, then we work on the floating point precision issues, and then we look at LODs. So we're like, the engine, that's like, as the technical person here, I'm sure like other team members would be able to skim over this, but the engine already has LODs. Like we're not like LODs just mean level of detail, and level of detail just means that like there are certain things that further away the engine no longer does or no longer shows or like does with it, or like basically saves performance.
Yeah.
So the engine already does that, and like the fact that we have the ability to show like 1,000 blocks of view distance is like testament to it. Like
Yeah.
you need a pretty good PC for it, but it's generally possible. And like that's because we are hiding a ton of stuff like as you go out, and there's also like occlusion culling and a bunch of other things that make this possible. However, what I know what people mean is that there is sort of this like these really far view distance mods. And so that's definitely something we want to look at, but it's not something that I can promise like a timeline on. I can only give you the priority stack of what like where we care about it, and that's like once we have the floating point precision stuff sorted. And the reason why we need to actually make a priority stack here is because the cubic chunks are fundamentally changing the way that we're like looking at what data is there. Then we can look at the floating point precision issues of like how do we reference those chunks and those blocks, and like how is everything in there like kind of the coordinate system itself. And then the LODs are kind of like this or like the like really far view distances is basically using both of that groundwork.
Yeah.
And the other problem is that the engineers that are doing the cubic chunks and the floating point precision issues are also going to be the ones that are going to work on like far view distances. So it's like we have like years of work here pretty much lined up for a couple of people that we just finished like hiring our rendering team together, and like now okay, but that's like it's a lot more. Like this is also affecting the engine team and the people who work on the fundamental data structures of the engine. So there's a lot of collaboration here.
Yeah, and it sounds like it'd be very fair to say that whatever level of optimization exists in the game today is probably nothing like what will exist once as you guys get through this like chain of things that you're working on doing and get to that end result, which will likely be a lot more optimized for both performance, view distance, and all these different things, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, our goal is to build a cutting edge, like to basically build the cutting edge voxel engine. And like it's supposed to basically do all the stuff that we think is possible technologically today and like bring it to as many platforms as we can. And that's like, I think that other programmers out there have already shown what is like theoretically possible on like if you mod another game like as much as you do. Now it's kind of on us to figure out how we put all of this together and like make it into one cohesive product that is then also a good game.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting.
Okay. My next one here from Fabian. Could localized weather vertically and horizontally be a thing? And then a follow-up for me would be how do you see weather working with infinite height? Do you stop experiencing rain or darkened sky when you're above the clouds, as an example? Will you be able to spot rain clouds moving into an area, especially as we talk about being able to see really far away? Or like how could weather tie into all of this?
Yeah, like this is another one of those like follow-up systems that is currently not being looked at because like the cubic chunks has to come first and it's not like necessarily part of it. But I brought an answer from design, which is altitude-based weather is absolutely something worth exploring. Colder mountain peaks, strong winds, and other altitude-driven effects. They are a natural way to give height to its own kinds of content and challenges rather than just making the world larger in scale. So imagine you have like tall peaks and like you have those snowy and like now there is this really strong storm that also, kind of gives you resistance through wind. Interesting ideas, but ultimately up to design and what they need, and then we build the system around those needs.
Okay. Now a question from Zodius Faith. Does infinite world height mean infinite biome height generation capabilities? For example, could you have linked vertical biomes where you have a giant mountain or volcano that's split in half that leaves a gaping hole deep hundreds of blocks into the ground, revealing different biomes underground. So like basically like vertical biome stacking versus only horizontal, like biomes appearing horizontally and kind of reaching all the way up or all the way down. That makes sense.
Yeah, our world generation system already supports biomes at different heights, and that's like not new. What Cubic Chunks does is remove the vertical ceiling, so those underground biomes can now extend much deeper and like with far more variety. But for example, a giant volcano with a gaping chasm revealing layered underground biomes hundreds of blocks deep, already achievable. That's like a well-designed challenge for now, not an engine limitation. When it comes to like the design on this, it's that vertically connected biomes are very much something that we want to lean into, and that it helps us create more exciting and surprising worlds. But yeah, when we think about this as like in my vicinity of like as a technical person, this is a specific world generation thing that Cubic Chunks has currently actually nothing to do with.
Okay. So we've talked about like traveling and like, you know, how high up or down the world can be, how far you can see, going on an adventure, seeing really far away. So I think this next question is one that is going to be on a lot of people's minds. So with infinite world height coming, and then what we've talked about with the types of experiences that can bring along, what do you have planned for transportation, if you can say, or if you can't say specifically, like what are some challenges that you guys are looking at when it comes to that, for like traveling upwards or downwards hundreds of blocks, or reaching that mountain that you see thousands of blocks off in the distance, other than just, you know, traveling on foot or something like that?
Yeah, I again brought an answer from design here, and I'm just going to read it out.
Okay.
This is something we're actively thinking about internally right now, even before Cubic Chunk ships. We're constantly talking about how we make the existing verticality of our world more comfortable to navigate. The exact priority isn't set in stone, but in the short term, we're more seriously looking at grappling hook style and glider. We're also actively looking at mounts, and part of that work is definitely a bigger, more meaningful role for them in the adventure loop. Hot air balloons and other ideas are in the conversation too, but those are not the front runners. Equally important is the return trip. We don't have one exact answer locked in yet, but it feels clear that players need reliable and satisfying ways to get back up or back down, whether they're exploring ordinary caves or much deeper and taller content that has to be designed in, not measured, not assumed. A good example of why this matters today, the Howling Sands. Our desert zone has tall plateaus that are generally hard to get around. Even with Hytale's movement abilities, navigating serious elevation changes can be painful. This isn't a future problem, it's a current one, and we're actively working to solve, and Cubic Chunks raises the stakes. So there is also a question buried in this one about whether scale itself eventually stops being fun. There isn't really a magic number where the game suddenly becomes a chore. It depends much more on how the content is laid out, what motivates players to keep going, and what tools they have to deal with those spaces. If the journey up or down stays interesting, the scale can be very large without feeling tedious. It only becomes unfun when the experience and rewards no longer feel worth the time and effort required. The exciting part is that there's really no limit here, whether it's traversal gear, teleportation abilities, high-speed elevators, or creative solutions from the modding community. We'll figure this out, and we want to make vertical travel just as natural and fun as horizontal exploration.
I'm curious for you, like as a for you as a player. So not talking as, you know, not looking at what you guys will do, but like what is your preference here, right? Because there's obviously like this balance between, you know, teleporting is easy, it's quick, it's fun, but it kind of like disconnects you from the world, right? If you could just teleport from point A to point B infinitely without the restriction, you don't really see the world anymore. You just see these small slices you've already visited. But at the same time, if you have to physically travel that world, how do you do that in a way that's not annoying or inconvenient and waste a lot of time? Like, do you as a player, do you sit more on the side of I kind of like to teleport around and just make it like quick and snappy, or do you feel like that takes away from the experience of the world if you're just kind of zipping around everywhere without like actually traveling in some way?
I think what I like is the Diablo style or World of Warcraft style
Yeah.
teleportation. So in World of Warcraft, you have the Hearthstone,
Mhm.
and that's, in my opinion, is like a really good way. It's like you're basically you go on a one-way adventure, and then in the end, you hit the Hearthstone to get back into the city, and now you're still going to see all of this stuff to get back where you were, but you're not as forced to like leave this way and then like go back that way. Like you're basically you skip like one of these directions. And the other is in Diablo, that's like where you I played Diablo 3, I didn't actually play Diablo 4, but you
Mhm.
hit T and you're like you're starting a portal back to your base, and then you can go through that portal again to get where you were. So like the base kind of became your pocket dimension. I don't know what design like wants to do here, but like for me, I think if I was a player, then or like for me as a player, I would probably go with a World of Warcraft one where, getting back to base is the most important. I feel like sometimes you're just done and you kind of want to like hit that button for, yeah, bring me back to base. Like I just want to sort my stuff and log out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely going that route too, because I feel like when you could so quickly and easily like skip between areas, it all of a sudden it it, it kind of shrinks the world that you play in to the point where it doesn't feel like you're in a big open world anymore, because you never really see any of it, and maybe it removes a little bit of purpose of a lot of the world.
Yeah.
All right, we got one. Well, let me see which one I'm on. This one's from King D Sovereign. Will this affect how fluids work as they cross these vertical chunk borders? So do you see any kind of issues with that, maybe when it comes to like loading or any challenges on your end?
Not really. Fluids already cross chunk borders on the horizontal plane, and you've probably never even noticed, or maybe you did because it's bugged, because the whole fluid system was just thrown together. But vertical will be the same. So in the broader like physics rework that we have to do, and like given that we're not happy with how fluids currently behave,
Yeah.
it's something that like we will have to address. And like cubic chunks kind of just make it a little more. I mean, like they really don't change anything about this, to be
Yeah.
honest. Like
Okay.
it's in the end, like the abstraction that we build over these data structures just basically eliminate the need to like specially handle this.
Okay. And this question I liked a lot. So this is from Suni Shinobi. Will this make things like automation harder, having to deal with cubic chunks versus what exists now? And I'll give the example here of Minecraft, which I've played a lot, and even like a game like Minecraft, it has a lot of problem with like its redstone system sometimes when it comes to crossing chunk borders. And a chunk border can affect timing of things just a little bit, and that just a little bit of timing can sometimes cause a really big problem. So how does that look from a technical perspective in Hytale for whatever type of system you guys end up coming up with for automation?
Yeah, I thought about this, and it definitely makes stuff a little harder. So we already have the situation right now where, like as you said in Minecraft, for example, with redstone, because it is evaluated like basically on a block per block basis, and you kind of have the always like neighboring block, and then like you have the signal that goes from here into the chunk border, and now this chunk isn't loaded or it's only lazy loaded, so it basically just ends here, and then eventually you go there and it's not updated. Like you see this line active here, and here it's inactive, and you're like, why? And then years later, as you you progress, you figure out what like chunks are and how this all relates.
Yeah.
So I think the solution here is the same for with cubic chunks and without cubic chunks. Really, those systems need to be built in graph ways. Like they need to be following other data structures that are not as prone to like being like to be as easily segmented. And when we have, for example, this situation where some connecting block is on a chunk border and there is another connecting block here, we kind of need to link those chunks together as well up to a certain limit.
Yeah.
So those chunks basically, because there is now this block and there's this block, they create a loading dependency on each other. And if you don't want that because that is too expensive, then you kind of need to bake that whole system that is being built into like a more abstract, like more easily evaluated version that can be done without all of it being sort of loaded all the time. But I think my first solution would be to allow chunk linking or like chunk load linking and make sure that they know about each other being like dependent. And then you would load all of them at the same time on the server to make sure that they're simulated. However, for really large contraptions, that's like where like servers basically would need to have like some config that you basically set, oh, the maximum amount of like linked chunks can be, I don't know, 16. And if you then build something that's even larger, sorry, like that's it. If you have a really technical server, you want to pay the price, you set it to, 256 or 5,000, or you basically remove the limit altogether. And then it's up to you. Like you break your own server. We're not hosting it, so you do whatever you want with your server. But, you're aware at least of what could be happening. And you probably then also have the right tools to view why it might be breaking. But yes, it is definitely something that I think, especially if I look at mods like high energy, like there are certain things that will just be handled by the modders. And then if we introduce, or like when we introduce our kind of automation, either we avoid the problem altogether, or we will find some sort of solution that then the modders can also look at. And if modders all come to us and say, we really need the chunk load linking stuff right now, then we'll add it. But for now, I don't see a strong need, but always happy to reevaluate.
Okay. I guess it could always have like maybe some, like there's probably going to be some level of priority order where it would be like really important for these types of contraptions to have that chunk linking, but like these types of contraptions not. Like, I don't know, think of like a rail system. Let's say Hytale has a train in it. Well, you might not need those rails to have chunk linking because you're going to be linking a ton of chunks that way. And it's usually going to be for travel. You, the player, usually going to be there. It's not going to have a big negative consequence potentially if it doesn't link. Whereas a conveyor belt
like
that's
a train
moving
itself loads chunks.
Yeah. Whereas like a conveyor belt that's moving items around. If you have a conveyor belt that's moving items around, that might be really important to link to chunks because and it may be even for modders, if you want to take it further, maybe that's like a tag that a modder can have on a contraption or a block where does this trigger chunk linking or does it not?
Yeah, and like whatever loads chunks, whatever is there. I think that's like generally a thing that we will need to think about, and it will definitely be a source of bugs and issues, and that's the fun part of working in a sandbox game.
All right, here we're to the last question, and the one that I tried to skip ahead on earlier. This is from Zytronic. Could you see supporting either in vanilla or via mods toroidal world wrapping or spherical voxel world? And this user specifically was thinking about making a replica Earth. So I know you talked about that, and we talked about how that would be kind of difficult to do due to how it would affect block shaping. But what about that like toroidal world wrapping, like the where in practice in gameplay it wraps around even though visually it may not actually represent that, were you to be able to zoom out and look at it?
Yeah, so I really appreciate the ambition, but like so far from everything that I've evaluated, like this is really far down the priority list, and the implementation cost of doing something like this is quite high, and the number of players who would like use it, like it would be really hard to justify the return on investment, and I think for the foreseeable future, that's gonna be a no.
Okay.
But you know, like never say never, and I will like see, you know, maybe years down the line where like let's add it during like one of our programming jams.
Okay.
Who knows? Like I have no idea. I haven't even looked into how much like work it would actually be to implement, but given that we would basically have coordinate wrapping, I can already see it being a difficult thing on the even on the like more abstract levels before we even hit any gameplay systems.
Okay. So yeah, that was the last question I had here. So what is the most exciting part of this for you as a player? Like, what's the experience that you think this is going to unlock that you, Slikey, are excited about to hop into Hytale and experience?
For me, it's really progression. Like the diversity and progression where I can be in a zone, I can go somewhere, adventure on the surface, and then I can start digging down. I experience something there, I can jump like somewhere else into a different zone, and like I basically have this complete freedom of progression where I'm like looking for parts here or there, and like so far something that we found in Hytale is that players really enjoy the like the sense of vastness of the world, and like you traveling to get to places, to get certain things, and it's like the world is beautiful and you want to explore it, and giving us more ability to like, or like me thinking about, oh, I'm going to be like exploring a little bit down in the caves, then I go to another zone, then I go like into, you know, more difficult caves, maybe then I go into shallow ocean, and it's like it's so diverse in gameplay that where like you're constantly being sent around the world, and like even further like down into the like very lower levels, or like maybe even, you know, seeing those mountains or like floating islands that I have no way to really get to unless I have certain transportations. It's like there's just so many things that then like I have reasons to craft. Like that's like one of the things in Hytale that is currently so hard for me, is like when Simon or me say the game isn't fun, it's like because there's little reason to do things, and it's like there is all these things that you can do, but it's like you're kind of just doing them out of your own drive.
Yeah.
And if you sometimes you don't have that. Like sometimes I just sit there in front of the PC and I'm like, I don't know what to do, then I close the game.
Yeah.
Like, and so this for me is like is an addition. Like it's not the solution, but it's like it completes the solution to like, yeah, to finding that purpose, and like to find that diversity of like maybe there's like even 3 things I can do at the same time to progress. And like, oh, I don't like the underground right now, then I go to a zone. But like at the moment it's like you only really have those things. So unless you go to zone 4 where you have the underground jungles, which feel like an additional zone, but that's like a taste for what we can expect here. Is like those jungles, like underground jungles, are currently the exception. And I think that if this is the norm, that you're encountering these things everywhere in the world, like capsules of just other world that is underground, and you're like, oh my god, like it's just I don't know, that feels exciting to me.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. It's it's bigger than I think a lot of people could imagine in terms of the things that it's going to unlock, and I think a lot of people are going to be really excited about it. And I think once a lot of people get their hands on it and get to experience this like larger vertical world, they're going to wonder how they lived without it for so long and so many other games.
Yes. I mean, I like, if you ask me, the way that I see this is just like one of the first steps. Like in the future, when we have the cubic chunks, we have the floating point precision issues fixed, we have the like really far view distances, we have movable structures, like stuff that you can build a ship, you can sail it around. Like
Yeah.
those are the kind of things. Like recently, the people who know who we hired on the team and know what they did
Yeah.
in the modding community of other games. Like there is stuff, like there's talent here on the team that is waiting to get unleashed on certain problems that we're solving the issues in front, like that they depend on in order to actually get certain things done that are really then all of that together is supposed to be the generational voxel game. Like that is the block game, and like you basically you get all of that for whatever Hytale currently demands. Like you pay $20 and it's like now you have this really complete game.
Yeah.
And who knows what we do in the future, but it's like at the moment it feels like we are set for a golden age of block game experience here.
Yeah, I think so. And it's been really cool to see from my perspective. I'm sure yours too. There's a lot of games that are a lot of indie studios that are hopping in and making voxel games. And it's really cool to see this like actually be a genre that's getting a lot of cool things out there and a lot of different options out there.
You know how many times I heard in the past of like, oh, it's just a block game, right? Like can't be that hard. And then, really experienced developers started, throwing their ideas at certain problems. Like these engineers have shipped massive titles. And then, they hit a block game and it's like, what do you mean? Like we basically have to calculate everything in real time. Everything has to be done in like like nothing is certain. We can't really pre-compute anything. It's like there's the engineering challenge on a block game is so deep that I'm not surprised that there are not more block games out there because it's actually really hard. And so seeing more of them pop up means maybe the base challenges are gone, but like what we are trying to solve here, that's definitely something that I don't see many other projects even wanting to attempt, because it's like we have all the talent that has done this before and we are still relatively slow at succeeding in this, because it is just, even if you do it again, it is extremely difficult.
And one last question for you to see if you can answer this. Do you have any sense, or can you give any sense of time for how long it may be before like the Worldgen V2 modders, the people out there modding, will get their first taste of like this unlocked world height? Is there anything you can say on that right now?
Not reliably.
Okay.
I'm still crafting all the dependencies, so all of this work that is in here, like we have started on this work. You can see it like with RocksDB and in the code base. People can have already found the traces of it that we are preparing. But like ultimately, this affects rendering, this affects gameplay, this, like as I said like earlier, the other systems that are there. We need to make adapters for these, and like if we were to hack it together and ignore that people's worlds would break, then we could get it done probably like in a month. However, we want to implement this in a way that the existing worlds don't break, and that is really important to us. Like I've seen this like many times now on different social media platforms, that people say, oh, don't start a forever world. Meanwhile, our team is putting everything we can to put like to make sure that those worlds are not like breaking, and that the world you started on on January 13th when we released the early access, that those worlds are still playable. And like, yeah, we have data corruption, and like there is reasons why those worlds break, but it's not because we are like conceptually breaking them in the sense of, oh, we abandoned support. It's because of some other bugs that are that are doing this, but hopefully we can carry all the worlds through all of this.
Great. That's all I have for you in terms of questions. Did you have anything else that you thought was important to get out there, or did you like to say to everybody?
I mean, thank you for the support so far, and like even you covering all the news and like supporting us with community feedback, and like when you send us all your feedback and your questions on X or like even Discord, like we really appreciate it. And without the community asking us so many good questions and driving those requirements and telling us what you desire and what you want and what you need, like without that we wouldn't be able to do really anything, because this project would then be kind of directionless and we wouldn't really know like where to take it. So without the community, like Hytale wouldn't really be what it is. And so thank you.
Yeah, I think thank you too, by the way. And I think it shows that you guys made a great decision of getting the game in people's hands now, despite the fact that you knew that it had a lot of shortcomings that were very obvious currently, because now you're getting all of that direction. And I think it's giving a lot of people a lot of reason to get really excited.
I mean, we told everyone from day one, like when we started the we're going to release it, the game is not good yet. Nobody wanted to believe us, but then like as you saw you experienced it with time, like you saw that what we mean. And I think that like now finally the core community and us, we're aligned on like,
Yes.
yeah, the game has stuff to work on and there are shortcomings, but overall like this team that we have assembled and the community, we all together, we can make it into something that is really going to be meaningful and fun. And this whole experience of working with the community and being so engaged, like more than any other game studio really out there, so far has been a massive pleasure. And so like even if we don't succeed in making all of this a really big success, it's like we still had fun on the way. So it is what it is. But I'm pretty sure that we will be able to do it, and we have the long-term commitment, and we'll be here year after year.
Yeah, and I'll just end it with that's the great way. I think that's what a lot of people appreciate about you guys is it's not about the success isn't the end goal. It's a good game is the end goal. And luckily for all of us and for you guys, that if you get to that end goal of a good game, which it looks like we're heading there, the success will just come. You're focusing on the right prize, and then everything else will just fall in place as it needs to.
Absolutely.
All right, Slikey, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you.